morning. You're listening to Central Wisconsin's 24-hour information station, AM 1320 WFHR. It's time now for the Morning Magazine, brought to you by Comfort Air Heating, Cooling, Plumbing. Now, with the Morning Magazine, here's Carl Hilke.
Thank you, Jerry, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's show on AM 1320 and streaming live at WFHR.com. We also welcome our buddy Jesse from Wisconsin Rapids Community Media. He's digitally recording us in high definition for viewing on their fine website or on your local public access channel, depending on your provider. And the reason why he's here, it's our monthly visit with Wood County Sheriff Shawn Becker, who's brought along two special guests this morning. With that, we say good morning to the Sheriff of Wood County, Shawn Becker. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Pleasure to be here.
Okay, so I'm going to let you introduce the two. And we got, as I mentioned in my tease this morning, a fairly serious topic, talking about mental health.
Yeah, I brought with me Czys from Human Services and Crisis. She oversees that part of Human Services, and then Deputy Doug Christanson. Doug's been on the show before, but we talked about a different topic at that time. Today, we want to really kind of focus on mental health. That's something that through the years that, we've taken a different stance as far as being proactive with our deputies and training them. And that's where Katie's going to come in a lot to talk about what we've done. I'd say probably about 5 years ago, there was at least a significant change on how we handled mental health calls of service, chapter commitments, mental health commitments. Law enforcement took kind of a different role where before we used to make that decision on if somebody was going to be committed to mental hospital. Once Crisis got involved, that decision was coming from Crisis. And at the time, some deputies struggled, including the one to my right, Doug Christanson, and that changed. Change takes a while to move forward with, and with that change, Doug came in. At that time, I was a patrol lieutenant or captain, overseeing our patrol division. He had a lot of questions, and it really started to evolve a lot of things, the relationships that we have with Human Services and Crisis with Katie, and what we've taken a different approach. Especially training our deputies.
Okay, so the role between the two departments, maybe we could begin with some of the basics.
Sure.
The role of Crisis when you're dealing with a situation that the sheriff just outlined, what's your role?
Yeah, so, and I apologize, I have a cold, so if I...
That's okay.
Yeah. But so back in about 2007 is actually when that law changed that happened, that Human Services had to take a little bit more of a role in the crisis realm in making decisions on chapters. It used to be traditionally that law enforcement made that decision and that it was handed over to Human Services. And there was a law change that basically stated that someone with mental health training, somebody who was a licensed professional, needed to be involved in that decision. And so it took it away from law enforcement in the entirety and said that a law enforcement officer has to work with somebody from Human Services to make that decision, because they felt that too many people were being detained to mental health hospitals that didn't necessarily have to be detained. So that process changed back then, and they decided that somebody from Human Services needed to be involved in that. So on the crisis side of things, what we do is that assessment piece to determine if someone is having suicidal ideation or homicidal ideation, or they're not in a good state of their well-being. We are looking at if there's a way for us to keep them safe in the community, or if there's an alternative plan or a lesser restrictive option that we can use to keep them safe rather than sending them to a hospital. And so we evaluate that kind of on a spectrum from the least restrictive, which is they go home and they're able to remain in the setting that they are in, all the way up to the most restrictive, which would be us placing them in that hospitalization type setting. So Crisis completes the assessment part of that. We partner very closely with law enforcement, and then law enforcement would actually carry out any detention that would occur.
Now, what timeline are we talking about? Law enforcement contacts you, we have this situation. Mm-hmm. You come. So how long of a time period are we talking about?
So really it kind of depends on the nature of the call. If it's something that's initiated by law enforcement, so a lot of times those start as a welfare check. Somebody calls into the sheriff's department and says, I'm concerned about this individual in the community. Can you go check on them? Law enforcement's going to respond to that. They go out and they do that initial contact, and they will call Crisis right away and say, I'm out with this individual. They are telling telling me that they're having thoughts of hurting themselves or whatever the case may be, and then we will do that assessment. An assessment can take anywhere from about 15 minutes to about 45 minutes with that person. Initially, we do that assessment over the phone with the officer present on scene with them, and we talk to them and ask them a series of questions that follow kind of our procedures and processes to determine what we can do to keep that person safe. And then during that time frame, as we're coming up with either a safety plan or if we're deciding, no, this person needs to go to the hospital for medical clearance so that we can continue with a hospitalization, it can be in that 15 to 45 minute range. If they go to the hospital then for medical clearance, that's the piece that takes a little bit longer because there's labs and blood work and different things like that that have to happen. And if somebody has actually taken steps to harm themselves, so maybe they've overdosed on medications, they may be in the hospital for an extended period of time. So that can be hours. Sometimes it can even be days, depending on the nature of what they have done. So it really kind of can vary in that aspect. And throughout that entire process, we're partnering with law enforcement.
Okay, so Doug, have they alleviated some of your concerns?
Well, this is a process that not only myself but other officers have gone through. During that transition phase, I guess speaking for myself, it appeared that a lot of people were falling through the cracks, that they weren't getting the help that I thought that they needed. As a result, in many conversations with then Captain Becker, he made arrangements with Katie that I was able to attend crisis intervention training. Same training that the actual crisis workers go through for recertification. As a result of that training, it became very obvious to me that there was not a working relationship between crisis intervention and law enforcement. And at the end of that training, the facilitator asked if I had ever heard of a training called Crisis Intervention Teams, or CIT training. I hadn't. I brought that back to Shawn, who, unbeknownst to me, had been having conversations with Katie about sending me to this training. So I was able to go to that over in over in Appleton. And the trainer there was one of the first, if not the first, crisis intervention teams officer in the state of Wisconsin. After a full week of training there, I became aware that we had resources and techniques and everything across the board to make not only my job easier, but safer, not only for me, but also for the people that were actually in crisis. So after coming back within the first week, I was able to test the principles and the techniques that I had learned at that training. And much to my amazement, it worked. And it worked very, very well. After seeing this, I then spoke with Shawn, and I told him we need to get all of our officers trained in this. And today's date, I think we have all but one or two officers for the Sheriff's Department trained in crisis intervention teams training.
Yeah, and to piggyback on what Doug's saying, I mean, he wasn't a pain. Don't look at it that way. I know. But, he came back to me with, a lot of questions, and he wasn't in complete agreement with what crisis was doing. And that's where the open lines of communication is so important with working with other agencies within the county. Katie comes from a background of law enforcement. She's been through the training, and out of frustration, I'm like, what can we do to help Doug, not only Doug out, but our law enforcement agency as we go through this transition? There's got to be something we can do. And that idea of CIT came out, and we sent Doug, and he came back, and the light bulb went out, and he took it and ran with it. And he's right. To date, I think there's 2 deputies on our patrol side of things that have not gone through the training. And our investigators are now going to, because this is applicable for any law enforcement officer, no matter if they're a couple of years into their career or they're 20+ year veteran. This is some information, some training that is very valuable, not only to the deputy but to the community as well. And I'm very happy to say, and we'll talk more about it, is we were sending our deputies throughout the state to go through the CIT training. And the more we talk to Crisis and Katie, I'm like, hey, I think there's a pretty good opportunity here to start our own course, our own CIT course, because that's going to give our local law enforcement officers an opportunity to train with the services that are provided through human services and crisis, so we can get an opportunity to see what services are out there for people who are in crisis. And Katie and Doug can talk about that a little bit more. I'm very excited to say that I'm going to go to this course coming up this fall. I've been wanting to go through it for years, and I will be in the next enrolled class that we're going to have coming up in October at Midstate.
I'll let Katie and Doug both respond to this. What tools or techniques or skill set does this training give you in this type of a situation?
I think a lot of it is really just an understanding of the individual and kind of a different perspective. When somebody's in a mental health crisis, I mean, and anybody can relate to this, if you've had that bad day where you're not thinking as clearly as you normally would be if everything that was going on around you wasn't going on. And it just gives the officers kind of a different perspective to be able to approach those individuals, because in that law enforcement realm, like Shawn alluded to, I come from a background of law enforcement. I am still a part-time officer. And so one of the things in the law enforcement world that they teach you is that you're always in control of your setting, and that you go in and you solve the problem and you fix it right then and there. And it's kind of a rapid pace that officers are usually trained to move at. And one of the things when someone is in a mental health crisis is you really have to slow that down. You have to give them time to think and to process and to be able to connect things to what you're saying, and you have to be able to kind of be at the same place as that person in crisis. And so it helps officers recognize that and realize that it's not that somebody's not trying to listen to them or comply with orders, or that it's not that they aren't wanting to do what the officer wants them to. Sometimes they're just not there to be able to understand what the officer is saying to them that quick and to respond to that. So as Doug alluded to before, it really is a safer approach, because it's teaching the officers how to think about what a person is thinking like when they're in that mental health crisis. So it slows them down, it gives them that different perspective, and it allows them to connect and treat them like that person who's in a crisis, and show empathy and compassion and help walk with them through that crisis and get them to the help that they actually need.
And Doug, I guess that's where it comes, you avoid the possibility of a blow up into something much bigger that way.
Yes, that's correct. As Katie was saying, officers are now taking a lot more time trying to put themselves in the person's shoes. We as officers may never understand truly where that person is coming from, but based on what they're saying, we try to understand some of the background behind what has put them in the place that they're at.
Okay.
And the biggest thing is treating them as a person, not the next complaint or the next thing that an officer has to deal with. It's slowing down, that they understand, that the officer understands that they're a person.
Okay.
And treated as such.
Right.
And it's really important for the community to understand that this by no means is this training doesn't replace normal officer tactics. Obviously, officer safety and the community safety is always going to be first and foremost. And so that's never going to change in regards to, a lot of people are like, they ask questions about, the different uses of force and things like that. And that's never going to completely be eliminated from this realm. Law enforcement officers have an obligation to keep the community and themselves safe, and that's always going to be the first priority. But this is a tool in their toolbox, is the way we kind of describe it. Is it's another approach that they can take to slow that down and try and resolve the situation without having to escalate the situation and go through those use of force techniques. So it becomes a safer process.
Well, Shawn, in your previous position, you and I have talked one time about the fact that negotiations.
Right.
In a situation where you're trying to talk somebody into surrendering, hey, this kind of fits into that.
It did.
Calm people down, calm the situation down, so that it doesn't escalate.
Right. When Doug was the first to go through the CIT training over in Appleton, we sent one of our crisis negotiators as well, Christine Bether, just because I felt that, she's on our special response team as a negotiator. Now, is this truly set for a crisis negotiator? No. This is stuff that our everyday patrol officers are utilizing. But it fit, in my opinion, like, hey, she should be the next person to go with Doug because of what she does outside of her patrol duties. But no, you're exactly right. And we've talked about this. If we apply these techniques, these interview techniques, when somebody's in crisis, you save one life from that, it's worth it.
Yeah, that's the bottom line, and that's why it's saving lives and also keeping officers safe.
Right.
So if you can avoid something escalating into something more violent and more dangerous, and you still get that person the help they need or get them to where they should be, you've accomplished.
Absolutely. And I think another part of it is historically law enforcement officers had heard, if the word suicide or is made mention of. If somebody says, I'm thinking about hurting myself, law enforcement was very quick to say, oh, you need to be in a hospital because that's the only safe place to be. And in the training, we always talk about, if I told everybody in this room right now that you're going to go on a minimum of a 72-hour vacation, but you don't get to make any phone calls, you don't get to take care of your children, you don't get to take care of your pets, I don't really care that you have a job to get to or anything else. All of your other life obligations just kind of have to stop, and we're going to put you into that hospital because that's the safest place for you to be. And I asked the room, how many people here want to go do that right now, knowing that? Most people say no because it's very inconvenient and it actually causes more stressors. And so part of that is explaining to our officers so that they understand what the process is. We take people out of their lives, and sometimes that is more stressful and causes more problems for that individual than if we were able to keep them safe in the community and come up with a safety plan where we're able to get them connected to outpatient resources, and we're able to get them in to see their providers and talk about what the actual sources of their stress are that are causing them to have that suicidal ideation or be in the situation that they're in. And if we can resolve some of those situations, a lot of times we can keep that person safe without having to go to the hospital.
Katie, is it sometimes people are just, they're saying what I'm thinking suicide or hurting myself. It's really a cry for help. They're frustrated. They don't know what to do or where to go. And so
They want relief. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, in the hospital, they ask you if you ever have pain. On a scale of 0 to 10, what is your pain?
Right,
0 being no
right.
pain, 10 being the worst pain. We kind of do something similar in the mental health realm of right now, if you had no ideation at 0 and 10 means that you're going to some way find a way to complete suicide today, we kind of look at that. And if it's below a 10, we know that there's ways we can work in there. There's a lot of times they're frustrated about finances, or they're overwhelming stressors, or they don't have a lot of natural supports in the community, or they're looking for, maybe they don't have a job, or housing is an issue for them. And we have a lot of resources through human services and through our community in general that we can connect people with. And if they don't know about those things, they don't know where to start. And so they're looking for that relief and that help to solve all of that overwhelming burden that they're feeling. And if we can alleviate those areas, a lot of times we can eliminate some of that suicidal ideation, or at least decrease it and keep them safe in the community and work on those stressors to get them to a better place. And a lot of times, if we're able to intervene and help those individuals, we don't see them come back into crisis again in the future. So we're able to get them back up on their feet, get them healthy, and they're able to return to normal, productive lives. And I think it's one of the things in CIT that we talk about a lot is that anybody can go into crisis. And we even talk about officer wellness and recognizing that mental health is something that's been very stigmatized for many, many years, and it needs to really change. It needs to be something that's thought of as no different than if somebody's having a heart attack, you can go to the cardiologist. And if you're having, joint pains, and if you're having, stomach pains, you go to the doctor and they're able to help with that. It's the same thing with your brain. Your brain can have some stressors and some pains too, and there's different ways to work with that and help alleviate that.
You just brought up something I want to get into today with our conversation is officers. The officers' mental health. I know that's something that you are very concerned about. But are we seeing, before we go to break, are we seeing an increase in the amount of these type of reports or incidents in Wood County?
Mental health calls of service. I think times of the year you see a little bit, spike a little when
Sure.
whether weather conditions are around that are like the last couple of days that are kind of gloomy. That affects people. Or time of year, the holiday season we do see an increase in mental health calls of service. One thing it's important to note. Crisis is available not just for law enforcement officers 24/7, but the community as well. So if you're having, if somebody's having a concern or an issue, call. You don't have to call law enforcement to get that information. You can call our dispatch center, and they can provide it for you. And somebody's available 24 hours a day to sit down and talk. And as Katie mentioned, and part of that training is, familiarizing the officers with what services we have. Because if we do handle a mental health call to service, and the officer realizes, okay, you're looking at a housing issue or a financial issue, that information can be provided to, crisis, so then, they can work ahead of this to try to provide that information for that person. But again, it's important to note that the crisis is available 24/7 to the community. It's not just a law enforcement thing.
What's the number for crisis?
Yeah, so to get a hold of crisis on the south end in the Wisconsin Rapids area, it's 715-421-2345. And on the north end in the Marshfield area, it's 715-384-5555. And those are answered 24 hours a day, 7 days a week by crisis staff. And there's no voicemail to those, so they're just going to ring until somebody picks up. So there's a crisis worker there, like we've already alluded to, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And Shawn mentioned, that a lot of times they come through law enforcement, but actually crisis initiates a lot of the law enforcement calls and welfare checks as well, because people can call crisis if they don't want to contact law enforcement right away, and they can work directly through crisis initially. And so if they're concerned about a loved one or a family member, they can call crisis and they will talk to them. They'll offer supportive listening. They're able to offer resources and referrals. They're able to do those assessments. And if law enforcement never has to be involved, we don't necessarily contact them. So if somebody calls us and says, I'm having that suicidal ideation, or I'm not doing well, we'll do that assessment. And if we can come up with a safety plan, law enforcement is never contacted. Only if we go, we think we need to get you to a hospital because we don't feel that you're going to be safe in the community. At that point, we'll bring law enforcement in and we tell them what we're doing. We're very open about the whole process and explaining that to them and making them aware of that. And so at that point, we would call law enforcement and say, hey, we're working with this individual. We're going to be pursuing a detention. We need an officer to respond out to take this person to the hospital for that process.
I like what you said, though, about mental health. We got to get rid of the stigma because there are people that are hurting. And if you had a bad headache and a series of bad headaches, you go to a doctor
Absolutely.
to have it checked, and there's no big deal about it. If someone's having recurring depression or something like that, they should be able to say, I need some help.
Absolutely.
And there shouldn't be a stigma attached to that.
Absolutely.
Okay, we got to take a quick break, then we're going to continue. I want to talk, when we come out of break, I want to talk about law enforcement and mental health. There was a recent case up in the Marshfield area that traumatized everybody, but I'm sure the officers that were investigating it, and I want to talk about that.
Right.
We're talking about mental health during our visit with Wood County Sheriff Shawn Becker. Crisis Supervisor Czys is here, and Deputy Doug Christanson as well. We'll have more on this topic when the Morning Magazine continues right after this.
Good morning and welcome back to The Morning Magazine, presented by Comfort Air Heating, Cooling, Plumbing. It's time for part 2. Once again, here's Carl Hilke.
Thanks again, Jerry, and welcome back, everybody, to today's show on AM 1320 and streaming live at WFHR.com. We also welcome our friends from Wisconsin Rapids Community Media who are here recording this for viewing on their fine website or on your local public access channel. And the reason why, it's our monthly visit with Wood County Sheriff Shawn Becker, and he brought along as his special guest today Crisis Supervisor Czys and Deputy Doug Christanson. And we've been talking about the whole issue of mental health and crisis intervention and law enforcement and the partnership between these two disciplines. I want to get into law enforcement mental health.
Sure.
You folks are on the front lines of some difficult situations.
Yeah.
And you just had one which traumatized the whole region with this baby that was found dead in Marshfield. And
yeah, but I won't go into details of the investigation because it's still ongoing.
Right, right. But how do you handle something like that?
It's hard. It's very hard. Even for myself, getting the call the day that was reported, it was really, hard to fathom, hard to understand why such an innocent person and somebody chose their faith, and it didn't have to be like that. But again, and it's hard to talk about. It's hard for the organization to talk about. But that's where your partnerships and you have that train established that we've been talking about, put together. That's where you have crisis. Katie put together debriefs where you bring everybody that was involved in that incident together, come in and talk about it. And Doug and Katie can talk about that more and what we're doing to move forward. But those are very, very hard situations to go through, and it's going to continue. As I mentioned, the investigation's ongoing. Me personally, I make sure that the people that had, very close involvement with the investigation, just checking in on, hey, you doing okay? You have, the day it was reported, our lieutenant, Brian Peterson, he delivered his own child in the Quick Trip parking lot here on 8th Street. So now you look at his personal experience, now you're dealing with a terrible situation like this. How are you feeling? There's options out there. If you don't want to talk to me, which you don't have to, there's other people that you can. But, it's very important for me personally as being involved with the Sheriff's Department that the staff is okay with this. And then having, things in place that there's option out there to talk to somebody about it, and that's okay. We talked about stigma a little bit ago. The stigma in law enforcement officers, years ago. We're tough. We can handle seeing any terrible situation and not worry about our mental health. That's wrong. We lose far too many law enforcement officers to suicide every year than we do in the line of duty. And what I look at that is the opportunity I have as sheriff is I can take a different stance in that, because if I ever lose a corrections officer, a deputy, or anybody to suicide, I'm going to take that personal, because that means I didn't do enough. All right, so that's something that stigma has to go away. If there's something that's bothering you as a law enforcement officer, you should have the opportunity and the avenues to seek some help, and that's okay. I've done it.
Yeah. You're human beings.
Correct. I mean, you have that foundation at home, and sometimes that foundation at home isn't enough. And that's where you go out and you can work with. Like I said, it's very fortunate having that strong working relationship that we have here in Wood County with crisis, because that opens up so many opportunities to help us out.
So, Katie, when that kind of a situation, when you're dealing with law enforcement officers who've been through a difficult situation, what's the process?
So that's something that we have addressed countywide, actually, most recently. I alluded to the fact that I'm also a law enforcement officer, but I also work in fire and EMS, and this isn't something that just affects law enforcement. It's all of our emergency responders. Sure. They're the ones responding out to some pretty horrific scenes, and a lot of times people think, oh, that's on TV, that's in big cities, but it's actually here in our local area. And so recently we've been working together to put together a crisis incident stress management team, or essentially a debrief team. And so administrators from a lot of our major organizations, so Marshfield Police Department and Fire Department, Wood County Sheriff's Department, the Dispatch Center, Wisconsin Rapids Fire Department and Police Department, Nakusa Ambulance, have all come together, and we have a administrative team that we created, and we've actually started a peer critical incident stress management team. So we're in the process of training about 40 peer responders that are able to go out and do debriefs following some of these critical situations. So in this situation with the infant homicide, we were able to put together 3 different debrief situations where peers go in and we're able to just kind of have a collaborative discussion per se, and we kind of go around and talk about the situation, and we don't focus on who did what and what the response was and the technical or the tactical approach to it, but the human part of it. And, what stands out is, if you could erase one thing from everything that you saw, knowing the outcome would be the same, what would you make go away? Or what are the triggers? And we teach all of the people involved about what are normal reactions after a stressful incident. And we talk about what's normal and when they might need some additional help and support. And we really try to educate them and just make it normal. Like you said, we're human and we all have those strong reactions. And in the emergency services realm, people are expected to be able to go in and handle those situations and not react at that time. But after the fact, they have a lot of strong emotions and they have to be able to process through that to stay healthy. And so that's what we really focus. And if we find somebody that really does need additional support and help, I personally take that as something that I am invested in, and I get involved in those situations. We've had a couple of situations where Shawn has contacted me and said, hey, we have somebody who needs some help, and I personally will get involved in those situations. We keep them as confidential as possible, and we get them out of our area, because it's really important to maintain that integrity and confidentiality for the person, and to make sure that they're able to keep providing services in our local communities. So we'll get them the help and support they need elsewhere, so they don't have to, face that situation here and feel like that they can't be honest about everything and feel like they can't get the appropriate services. We'll connect them to hospitals out of our area. We'll connect them to therapists out of our area if that's what they want. If they're comfortable seeing somebody here, comfortable getting services here, we'll absolutely do that as well. We just work very closely with that person and make it a very person-centered solution. So whatever it is that person needs, we work very hard to make sure that that's what they get.
Doug, as a deputy, how does that make you feel to know that that's there for you if you need it?
It's very comforting to know that the administration has our back on this stuff, that there are resources available, and quite frankly are easily accessible. Some of the other resources that are available, kind of a front line. We have a chaplain program at the Sheriff's Department.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yep. In addition to peer support, I've been through the chaplain training as well as the peer support training, and more or less act as a liaison for our chaplain program. We have 2 of them right now. They will come in. They will ride with an officer that would just like to talk. They will meet you for coffee, whatever it takes to help get you through a bad situation, whether it would be something at work or maybe even something that happened at home, all the way across the board.
Yeah.
So Doug's done just an outstanding job with this, and he's one of our, he's in the peer support part of this, and he'll look through our complaint log, the media gets, and he'll look through that. And if there's a call to service that seemed to be stressful, whether it's involving a death or not, but it'll be very proactive, and he'll give that deputy or deputies a call that were involved in it, and just, hey, you doing okay? You want to sit down with a cup of coffee and just talk, and he's very proactive, and that's been expanding at the Sheriff's Department, where not only other deputies are getting involved in being peer support, but our corrections staff as well. We can't ignore that a big part of our Sheriff's Department is our jail.
Sure.
And not only are we, expanding our peer support and our corrections staff, but we're doing it with dispatch as well. Just because we're all part of one team, and we all, absorb things a little bit differently. As the dispatch will take that tragic call, and then from there, we'll go out and handle that situation with fire, EMS, law enforcement. And in the case that we're talking about, now our corrections staff have to make sure that 2 people that were responsible for a terrible act are in our custody, and they have to be safe while they go through the criminal proceedings. And that's going to take a while. So this is one big, puzzle that we're all part of. And we all go through these types of situations, these stressors, differently. Mm-hmm. And we need to, focus on everybody, not just exclusively to, the law enforcement officers. We're all in this together.
You bring up a good point, like, for instance, dispatch. That can be a very stressful job. Very. Corrections officers, we've heard about how stressful that can be.
Right.
So it's important that, like you said, it's a team approach.
Right.
And that's what's really been helpful about our critical incident stress management team. And in this situation, we actually brought together not only the law enforcement officers who responded, but also all the hospital professionals that were involved in this particular situation, and the dispatchers. And we were able to bring everybody together, because one of the important parts about these situations is being able to understand all the different perspectives, because it gives a person that whole picture, and they're able to put some pieces together. And, law enforcement officers don't get to see what happens in the hospital and the kind of care that somebody receives, and in particular the infant. infant that was brought into the hospital. They don't get to know all of those details. And then the dispatchers don't get to know what happened after they dispatch out the officers all the time. So it's really kind of completing that circle and helping those individuals who are part of that situation to understand all the different perspectives and get some closure. And a lot of times just talking about that and processing it and getting to hear those kinds of pieces really can give some resolution to a situation and make people more comfortable with everything. Even if it's a horrific outcome, it's knowing everybody did everything that they could and hearing from all the other individuals that they too are struggling and kind of having that camaraderie and being able to be supports for one another for those that were involved in it. And so they're able to share all of those emotions and those feelings and everything that they went through, to have that collaborative approach. And it really makes it a team effort, and it makes everybody feel more supported, and it's overall just great for everybody's mental well-being.
Yeah, you don't beat yourself up for something. We did what we could do, and it was a tragic outcome, and then you deal with the emotion. What I'm hearing is, instead of trying to be the macho cop, hey, admit your feelings.
Right.
Admit your feelings. Deal with your feelings, and the support system that you're creating will help that.
Absolutely, and it's identifying their resilience too. I mean, resilience is a really important part of this, and understanding where the positives are. And it's really easy to focus on negatives and the ultimate negative outcome, but also, the thing that was shared a lot in all of our debriefs was just the teamwork and the things that they saw amongst each other, responding together and working together, and how that all happens. And, that really rebuilds an officer's ability, a provider's ability, medical, fire, EMS, everybody across the board. It really gives them that ability to go back out and keep doing what they do every day and face the situations they do when they know that we're all out there trying to do the best that we can and help individuals in our community.
And Sheriff, as everybody goes through this training that we've talked about, what do you envision the Wood County Sheriff's Department becoming?
Well, good question. It's, I envision the department to move forward, and we talked about the stigma not only within our staff but the community, and I believe that's changing, and that's going to continue as we move forward. The department, on the stigma with mental health, and that's changing, in my opinion, that it's more of an understanding, not only with the law enforcement agencies, but the community as well. And that's been a goal of mine for, I'm going to say, probably a minimum of 4 to 5 years. You're seeing two people on each side of me here that are a huge part of that. I only took the time to listen. I didn't go through the training yet. I will. Okay. But I listened, and I listened from both sides, and I looked at, okay, how is this going to, number one, benefit the department, benefit our law enforcement officers, our deputies. And, okay, listening to Katie is hearing one thing, but then having Doug go through the training and bringing it back is another thing. And just hearing, the positive things from the way we took this approach, I believe that we're a success. We're moving in that direction, and it's going to continue. And to go back to what we were talking about before, we talked about that collaborative effort and approach. When we discussed that terrible investigation that we're working on now, we worked together with Marshfield Police Department, the Wood County Sheriff's Department, state investigators. When that became a death investigation, a homicide investigation, everybody's working together, and having that collaborative approach and leadership amongst us works. Once I was notified of what was going on that Saturday, my next phone call is the Chief of Police, Rick Gomes, up in Marshfield. We have a great working relationship. There's nobody saying there's in charge of whatever. It's like, okay, what do you need? It's all hands on deck. And establishing those relationships throughout your career really works wonders. Mm-hmm. And you're seeing a result of that right now. You are.
Okay. And one of the things, too, I see for the general public is when they hear the fact that, okay, law enforcement understands that that sometimes they have to deal with some difficult things. That helps get that helps further get rid of stigma.
Absolutely. And I think the thing also to recognize is with our CIT training program, it's not just the Wood County Sheriff's Department that's going through that. We've been fortunate enough to partner with NAMI and being able to put that training on here locally. Almost all of Grand Rapids Police Department is CIT trained. Most of Nakusa Police Department is CIT trained. Pittsville has a CIT trained officer. Marshfield and Wisconsin Rapids both have a large number of officers that have been through that training. Port Edwards' officers have all been through that training. And then we go so far as to expand that out to Portage County, Adams County. We've had people from Clark County participate in the training. And the last round of training we did, we actually focused on correctional officers and dispatchers to start providing that training to them as well, because it's really just helping other individuals understand mental health and the different resources and access points. And it's great. It's only 40 hours of training, and we could do so much more, but it's at least a starting point to help individuals understand this. And so as Shawn talked about, it's that collaborative approach. It really is bringing all of our agencies together to help them understand this mental health piece and how they can better serve our community with that and themselves.
And will make for a more effective Sheriff's Department.
Correct.
One other thing we should talk about, and at the time I had the Wood County Board Chairman here recently, and we were talking about security.
Yeah, courthouse security.
At the courthouse, and we should let people know things are, I guess we're one of the few courthouses in the state that didn't really have a good security system, but now we're going to have one.
Right, and we didn't. And, I got to give our county board a lot of credit working together. They first made the investment in getting the equipment last year. So they started taking the steps and okay, we need to do something. And then the next thing was manning it. Who do you want to man this? Do you want it to be something that the Sheriff's Department does? Do you want to go outside and hire a private security company? And they recently gave it to the Sheriff's Department to man. And I'm very happy that they done the time, they did the research. I know it's not easy spending taxpayers' dollars, and when you're talking personnel, that's a lot of money, and we're adding 3 people to the Sheriff's Department staff to do that because we didn't have the positions to do that. We weren't going to take people from the road to do that, or investigators, because these deputies that are going to oversee courthouse security are sworn officers that are, they carry firearms, they're trained. And we did a survey, looking around, did some research with other counties that have courthouse security, and we kind of mirrored what Portage County's doing. That's what we put in for a presentation. And again, I really have to thank the county board for taking this up and moving forward with it. So our goal timeline is have the positions hired relatively soon, within the next few months, and we're hoping to have everything live as far as moving forward with this early October, late September. It's going to take a little bit of time to get people hired, number one, then get them trained, and we're going to have a promotion process because we're going to have somebody that is going to be in charge of courthouse security. There'll be a lieutenant that will oversee security for the whole facility. That's going to be a big job because you're going to talk about not only all 3 branches of our courts, that whole 3rd floor, the DA's office, the clerk of courts, and our jail, as far as inmate movement from the jail to court. That's going to be a big job, and we're still researching exactly how we're going to do that. We've got obviously very good ideas, but reaching out to our other counties that have courthouse security is what we're doing now. And again, expect for the public, early October, you're going to come in one entrance, and there's going to be scanning equipment that you'll have to go through. And obviously, you're not going to be able to bring weapons, contraband, or anything illegal. If you take a look at Marathon County's website, take a look at what people have brought in. Some of you tried to bring a firearm in. And I go back and think of all the years that I've worked here at the Sheriff's Department and have been on the 3rd floor. What has come in that we don't know about? So I'm really happy that our county board, again, I can't say it enough, it sounds like a broken record, but they took this on, made the investment to get the equipment, and now have made the investment to have it manned, and it's going to happen.
And I would imagine when the public enters the courthouse, there'll be one entry that they go through, and they'll get scanned, and then they can go from there to whatever department or whatever floor they they need to go to.
It wouldn't be just the third floor where all the courts are. It could be going into planning and zoning or a clerk's office or something, but you're going to have to go through that security station, and it'll be manned during business hours.
Okay, and I would imagine prior to that, you'll probably put out a press release or announcing, okay, we got the security system, now here's the stuff, don't try and go to bring this in because it'll get confiscated.
Yeah, look at it similar to an airport.
Okay.
What TSA does, that type of, those are going to be the items that are going to be prohibited to be bringing in. So it'd be very similar to equipment to that. That's why we expect like the busier times, obviously in the morning, but we'll have that manned. Whatever hours the courthouse is open, we're going to have that manned.
Okay, the department put out a request from the public to help with this theft of a camper. Every once in a while, you have a case and you kind of shake your head about the brazenness of something. So anything new you can report, or anything that you would request from the public that how they could help you?
Just take a look at the press release. We put some information out on our Facebook page. Just looking for help from the community. It was during the daylight hours, early in the morning, somebody went on to TJ's Auto and stole a camper, hooked up to it and left. So we did get some photographs of some video footage of the suspect leaving in a pickup truck. It looks like a black Denali, older style, with a camper. But like I said, we put out a press release and we're looking for help. If you do have some information, you can call us directly or use Crime Stoppers. Mm-hmm. You can possibly get an award. But you shake your head because that's happened at other dealerships as well, where people target a certain type of a vehicle. I know that some of the UTVs are popular, and I know there's a theft ring, if you want to call it, out of the Minnesota area that we've gotten some information on, but they target specific vehicles. I believe this camper was targeted because it's a toy hauler. It's a combination camper and toy hauler where you can put a UTV in it. And with a lot of the thefts that we're seeing with motor vehicles are those UTVs. So I think that's a possibility. It could be related, but if anybody has any information, please contact us.
What are you telling dealers around the area who might be having a similar type product that they're trying to sell? Are there certain steps that you would recommend that they take?
Secure their products. Secure the vehicles that you have on your lot. Good surveillance footage is very helpful, even though some of the, if you want to call it professional criminals that target specific vehicles will try to do their best to disguise themselves, but having cameras in certain areas where they aren't visible to the public are helpful, because that's information that we can get out to the public. We can talk about it, but if we can show somebody some information about what somebody looks like, or a vehicle, or possibly a license plate, that's always valuable. Okay.
And for the rest of us, again, lock your vehicles.
Right.
And just
do your best to protect what you have in your lot.
Okay. Eventually, we're going to have warmer weather.
I hope so. I can start skiing.
Yes. Well,
right now, the water temperature is a little cold.
A little bit.
Not going in. We had our last, for the aqua skiers, we had our last land practice Sunday. I'm finding out the older I get, there might be a time that I need to step aside, but I'm going to do at least one more year. But yeah, the water temperature is a little cold right now, so I don't think that I'll be skiing anytime soon, maybe within a month. But yeah, more and more people are out walking on the roads, biking. Just be aware of it. Slow down when you see pedestrian traffic. Yield to pedestrian traffic, and just be aware of that. And
coming up, we're going to have the big Memorial Day weekend, an unofficial start of summer, and like places like Buren double in size, and the like. Like you said, slow down and.
Yeah, there's a lot of construction in that area that you're specifying. The Bridgewater development is in full swing.
Okay.
I know that property has been sold out there, so that's going to develop. And as that develops, it's going to bring more and more people out in that area. So something to be aware of. But yeah, more and more people are going to be out enjoying the weather finally. Hopefully, knock on wood, we don't get another
I'll do that for you, Sheriff.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. I think everybody's ready to put it behind us.
Yeah. We don't want any. We want nice warm weather so we can. That will do a lot for everybody's mental health. We all feel a lot better. And again, if you're having graduation parties and the like, don't
serve to people that aren't of age. Remember, you're responsible if you're having a grad party and there are alcoholic beverages there. Just make sure that you're in control. Don't put yourself in a position that you're going to regret later.
Yeah, and if you've been enjoying a party, make sure you got a safe way to get home.
Yep, safe rides out there.
And yeah, there's plenty of safe rides, and so you're going to be in the water.
Coming out soon. Yep. Mm-hmm.
That's the other thing. You will have the boat patrol.
Right. Oh, good point. That'll start. It already has started. Okay. With Walleye Days, we'll have deputies out not just in the boat, but patrolling the boat launch, making sure everybody's safe, and getting their life jackets, making sure their batteries covered. So just important safety things to keep in mind. And we'll have our boat out. You can bet on Memorial Day weekend. And the goal isn't to write everybody tickets. It's to make sure everybody's abiding by the laws and having a good time safely.
That's it. Enjoy the holiday, but please don't put yourself at risk or other people at risk.
Right.
I want to thank you all for being here this morning. We've had a very good discussion. The sheriff brought along Crisis Supervisor Katie Czys. Thank you for being here. And Deputy Doug Christanson, thank you, Doug, for being here as well. And I hope we all got a better understanding now about the role of law enforcement and mental health. And let's get rid of the stigma so that we can effectively address issues like this.
No, thanks for having us.
Thank you all, and have a safe Memorial Day holiday if I don't see you before then.
You too, Carl.
Okay, and with that, we're going to wrap up this edition of the Morning Magazine on AM 1320 and WFHR.com. We also thank our buddy Jesse for being here from Wisconsin Rapids Community Media. You can view the video of this on their fine website or check the listing on your local public access channel for viewing times.